maybe on the road. Let us get our light bulb clickety-clack steampunk analog device opening going here on Evolution Hour, the 2nd of March, 2026, in our crazy train year of doom. And remember, tortuganwordpress.com, bunch of PDFs in there, fun stuff that can be downloaded, shared willy-nilly at your heart's content. Anyway, here we are. As you know, this is the ongoing process of slamming through source by effing source, Jonathan Sarfati and Joel Tay's book on dinosaurs, which, as we dealt with way earlier, not a hell of a lot on an awful lot of taxa. They're leaving a bunch of stuff out. In some cases, their views are conflicting with kind of stuff that's ending up over at AIG with their Ark Encounter. That's going to be material that we will be discussing in greater length in Rocks Were There Volume 2. And Jackson has completed his adjustments to the cosmology chapter. So now the onus is on me while he moves to his next chapter to finish off the Noah's Lost Worlds chapter and the Ark Encounter chapter, which will delve into all of that systematic stuff. But anyway, hopefully we're starting to see darkness at the end of the tunnel. It's been a busy week for me. My back is killing me from all of the schlepping up and down and in and out, rearranging material in the basement and cleaning things out, kind of preparatory for spring cleaning, and rearranging all of my note storing structure for the production line for the books and all that stuff. But great progress has been made, so it is not without its ancillary benefits. Anyway, so there we'll be discussing Sarfati and Tay. And then there will be a funky little dangling part 2 on a weird little paper in the regular science journals that looks like it might have side connotations and something to keep an eye out on. Fortunately, we'll be able to put full links on all of this stuff. Anyway, this long chapter that Sarfati and Tay have are trying to work their way through demolishing feathered theropods. And this big long section, which is effectively a sprawl on Sinus Arcturix that we were bringing up in previous episode. So they're trying to defeather things, and who are they relying on? Well, when you delve beneath the surface, besides the creationist Sarfati stuff he links to himself, it's Alan Fiducia, And so he lobs another of Fiducia's papers, this one from 2005, which means it was 17 years old when Sarfati and Tay were trying to invoke it. We'll be putting the full links up on that, where they're still manning the barricades. It's a co-authored work, at least. It's not just Fiducia trying to do this, but still not exactly a cutting-edge piece of technical material. And then they delve into a side issue, which is what was the skin structure of tyrannosaurs? Well, remember, tyrannosaurs are not the immediate ancestor group for birds. They are an offshoot in that theropod line of the Maniraptoran theropods, and you have to go quite a ways back to get to the branching lineages that are leading off tyrannosaurs. And tyrannosaurs got to be some of the biggest predators of the Cretaceous. So maybe they might not have the same dynamic for feather layouts. There were some depict that we're thinking maybe you could have a completely feathered full-size tyrannosaur, but by the time we get to this 2017 paper from Bell et al., which we'll be putting a link up, that's from the Royal Society, it's suggesting quite a different picture, that large tyrannosaurs might have had some feathers in some spots as little decorative elements, but the parts that they could actually have these scale impressions on, and they were looking at all these different taxa, so it's a quite comprehensive review, as even Sarfati and Tay were acknowledging an Achilles heel bit there. What's revealing is that the big summary bit, Sarfati and Tay are not paying attention to. So I will read you said analysis. Tyrannosaurs do not, therefore, exhibit the widely distributed filamentous feathers present in Dilong and Yutyrannus, where scales are unknown. In fact, and they had a couple sources. In fact, the quote that I'll be sticking in the video description will actually have the little bracketed stuff from their footnote material that people can consult, because it's an open access article, so you can look at it yourself. Anyway, to continue. In fact, within Coelurosauria, where feathers are present, they cover virtually the entire body. On the other hand, the co-occurrence of epidermal scales and filamentous structures has only been reported in some neornithischians, although the homology of these filamentous structures with theropod feathers has been questioned. Finally, the presence of epidermal scales in a large adult individual does not rule out the possibility that younger individuals possessed feathers, a developmental switchover that, to our knowledge, would be unprecedented at any rate. So, possible that Tyrannosaurids might have had some little insulatory feathers or something as newborn chicks, but certainly as adults doesn't look like they have a heck of a lot. Does that mean all the feathered theropod material is out the window? Hell no, as the very paper they cited made quite clear, and of which none of that showed up in Sarfatti-Tay's analysis. So that one drops into the bin of misrepresented technical source. There's also periodically in the book, they've got stuff, footnoted material on a page where the footnote number is way out of sync with the footnotes on the page. And it looks like, so when you look in the references, you would have like footnote 53 is brushing up against footnote 35. And so you have to look to the tail end of the reference notes at the end of the chapter to locate what that's referring to. It looks like they were adding source material late in the game and were just funneling it into pre-existing sections in the book. And that's why the footnoting is out of sequence. That's what I can figure. But at any rate, one of those meant that we're actually dealing with an item that relates to something else this time. And it turned out to have a fun kick to it. Because on page 254, they have this note 53 that crops up, and it's relating to pterosaur integuments. And that's from a paper from 2019 from Yang et al., which is going into the little filamentous feathery blips in various pterosaurs. It's called fuzz that's been found. You have to see it in a microscope to see what's going on. That's gradually been changing the perspective of pterosaurs as not just like bat-like membranes, but in fact kind of fuzzy, hairy bits. Now, Sarfatti-Tay, following up on the fiducia model, is trying to argue these things are just perfectly normal collagen. They're not actually feather structures, and that therefore collagen structures can form filamentous frameworks just like feathers, rather than else going on. You can look at the paper yourself and see what the heck is going on. But the fun part was that Yang et al., or at least most of the Yang et al. Team, didn't stop doing paleontology, because there's another paper from 2024, which of course is after Sarfatti-Tay's book, so I'm not accusing them of any problems in not citing it, but it's a very indicative follow-up. That's Nature Communications, that I'll be putting the full link up to, on, quote, cellular structure of dinosaur scales reveals retention of reptile-type skin during the evolutionary transition to feathers, unquote. So this whole structure of how deep and what the nature of these scale systems and feather systems in the development of same, how they interconnect, is the object of that paper. And you'll be able to see functionally there where a lot of the cutting edge material is. Alibardi's work and others that I've alluded to in the course of the series at various times certainly indicated that feathers and hair all stem from the same internal structure of the skin placodes before you even get to a scale stage, and that really the same genes, bone morphological protein and sonic hedgehog and all that are governing these structures. So the kind of detail level versus the hand waving of Sarfatti-Tay, I thought was extremely revealing, and I think it'll be kind of fun on it. Our part 2 bit concerns a very odd little paper that showed up last year, and it got alluded to by, whoops, I need to get my source on that so I can show it on the screen. apologize for the clunkiness of our operations from all of this other material. It's paper Evolution by Natural Induction by Richard Watson, Michael Levin, and Tim Lewins in 2025. Open access, as interface focus tends to be. And so I'll be putting a link up to that. Now, I certainly would never have paid any attention to this at all had it not been called to our attention in our little Science Friends network that we have on the internet that includes Dan Stern Cardinale and Gutsick Gibbon and Dapper Dino and Zach Hancock and all the rest, where we're jawboning various issues from science to politics in the kind of thing that we used to do in a chat area on the old Twitter, which we've moved away from that. And anyway, Zach Hancock brought this paper up and said, this is dumb. This is really a weird paper. It's a strange thing that I thought it was a meaningless piece of fluff. And I might have just left it at that in the fact that Hancock was looking at it from a geneticist point of view and seeing that there's really no there in this strange rambling paper. Hello there. Yes, we're still here. Yay. Yes, I have not gone away yet. Yes, I'm the bad penny that just is too stubborn to give up. Anyway, I might have let this thing skip and not made an episode out of it were it not for the Discovery Institute, because they wrote a little anonymous reaction to the same paper, and they were just burbling on about Michael Levin's being one of the contributors to this and recommending a 3-hour video by Levin and Lex Friedman on, quote, alien intelligence and biological life, unquote. So I'll be putting the link up to that YouTube thing as well. And the Discovery Institute thing is kind of like trying to make hay that here are these people trying to find deeper intelligence in the evolution of life, and when they are just failing to see the obvious thing that it's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge God character. But what it brought to mind was Richard Buggs. For those who have read Evolution, slam dunk, up there. There was a great deal of discussion, and I think we alluded to it in Rocks too. Richard Buggs' 2016 collaboration with Paul Nelson on orphan genes, and where, remember, Paul Nelson is a young Earth creationist who operates out of the Discovery and keeps his young Earth creationism on the down low. And Buggs is a normal evolutionist who clearly has religious inclinations, and so is weighed in on various chat things about whether or not Adam and Eve were real people and kind of when they lived and all that. There were back and forth between him and Swamidas and a few others over the last 5 or 10 years there. But it's an indication of that kind of proclivity for deep Mysterian explanations of things without really coming out and saying what they think. And so it'll be interesting to find out whether this Watson paper has the same kind of cachet of trying to insert deeper, darker issues into the matter than the matter really warrants, whether anyone pays much attention to it. These things pop up occasionally. There was the notorious case of this person who came up with this absolutely wacky idea of certain genetic weirdness with, I think, caterpillars or something. And the paper got into the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This has been a long time ago, because the person who edged it in there on her recommendation was Lynn Margulis, because she's a member of the society. And so that gives an into it. And it was a paper of just monumental dumb, and it got some responses at the time. So you can get these little niche areas where people have their little hobby horses, or scientists will know people with hobby horses that will kind of be going on about a thing in the same way that the asteroid impact or cometary impact model for the Younger Dryas has a small coterie of people. We're going to be discussing that at length in a big info box in Roxford there, because it's kind of an interesting analog of how controversies are dealt with in geology and science, and a counterpart of the kinds of controversies that get into with the general evolution thing. So I thought this weird little paper was worthy to be brought to the attention, if only because the polarity between Zach Hancock's thumbs down opinion and the not thumbs up, but like, it sounds like it might not be completely Darwinian. Hello, Purple. Approach of the Discovery Institute. It's an anonymous posting at the Discovery Institute. It's not written by, Klinghoffer or somebody like that. But it may come out. It's been quite a long time since it originally came out. That was in, yippity doodle. The Fridman 11 video was in November of 2025, and the interface focus thing was in December. So it's been just a couple months ago. And that means it's early enough onto the field as to whether or not it's got any legs, or anybody is going to be responding to it or commenting on it or just ignoring it. And so everybody that is interested in whether any of the names pop up as people that you've been looking at in other contexts, people can keep track of all of that to see what happens in it. And I'm sure Zach Hancock will be kind of keeping an eyeball on the thing to see what's going on. The wonderful advantage of having a network of people who have their own specialty and can look at things at a technical level that mere mortal me isn't quite capable of doing without a colossal amount of background research for fact checking. Whereas somebody who's expert in the field can pounce on it with a speed that I would never be able to emulate. So we'll call that to the attention on it. As we all know, we're also in our year of doom. Our weird, the State of the Union message went off last week with the God King Emperor prattling on for 2 hours, beating his own record as the longest speech, and certainly beating the record of having the longest State of the Union message without saying anything. That it was a weird fest of tossing out congressional medals of honor and all of that to kind of let the cachet of somebody else's honor rub off on Trump and his bunch. They all seemed to be just ridiculously happy and joyous when Trump was repeating a bunch of claptrap, as usual, like the idea that the Biden inflation after the pandemic was over was the worst in our history. No, it wasn't. Not by a long shot. And worse, Donald Trump had to have known this somewhere in his brain, since he lived through the period of the 1970s to know that the inflation rate was much higher then. During the stagflation period, it was flirting with 15% at its peak. And so has he forgotten that? And was anybody in the Trump administration ever telling him that that wasn't true? And was there anybody that even tried to put the brakes on that when he was repeating this at the State of the Union message? These will be interesting things for historians to want to find out about later on, once we hopefully get past Trump 2.0. I'm still holding my breath in gasp mode that to some extent it's a testament to how resilient the economy is that we haven't had a crash yet. The time from the Hoover inaugural in 1929 through to the collapse was within a year, whereas Trump is still slogging along and the economy is still slogging along, but warning signs of problems are all over the place. So it'll be an interesting bingo card for those who want to have it as to what might be the problems that could occur, which things will be the squeaky wheel. NVIDIA failing to make a quarterly growth. There's still a lot of skepticism about whether or not they're inflating their numbers over AI and all of these vastly expensive AI systems that are being built up. Yes, Trump has no idea of inflation because he's never had to think about how much anything cost when he wanted to buy it. Well, on a personal level, that's certainly true. But On a bigger scale, he is a person who fiddles with big projects that are in the multi-million-dollar level. And so, so the 1970s Trump was savvy enough to know that the Nixon wage and price controls that launched off that whole inflationary spiral was a bad idea. But the question is whether the demented 2020 Trump has forgotten that. He's certainly totally doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on tariffs. And then, of course, we also have this mess in Iran. As somebody on a Trump critic put up the little bit where Trump was insisting that if Kamala Harris becomes president, we'll have a war with Iran. Well, she didn't become president. Instead, Mr. Trump gives us a war with Iran after he's supposedly obliterated their nuclear capacity, and suddenly they're back again. They has to obliterate it again. So the mess of things, how serious a problem it is, how testy the Iranians will get over the fact that we just blew up their head Ayatollah. It's going to be rather interesting. Certainly the case that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis are pulling the strings on a lot of our policy, probably more than that bunch of slavering sycophants in the Senate, as useless a body on foreign policy advising as you could possibly imagine. If we survive all of this as historians, my gosh, the incompetence, the wimpiness of congressional and Senate oversight on the parts of the Trumpistas just shoots off the index, and of course is enabling a lot of corruption and manipulation. We have a shadow banking system that's unregulated that is starting to show stress signs. We, of course, will have the potential for a crypto meltdown. Trump is in the crypto business. How many of the zeros in his recent billions he's accumulated are ghost ones that will go poof in the case of a crash? We'll find out. Plus the amount of inflation that's being spurred on by those tariffs, which even in rolled back mode, he's just trying to get around the Supreme Court ruling by saying, I'm going to put them in anyway by some other means. And so clearly, at minimum, we're talking about a roughly 15% a tariff rate. And doesn't that translate into like 15% inflation over the long term? So expect the rest of the year to be interesting to see how belt tightening individuals and companies can be absorbing a lot of these costs before the belt breaks, and whether or not all these belt breakings will be simultaneous. Plus the fact that health costs are still not going down, and a lot of other factors, and housing costs are terrible. And there's been these are all festering problems that every administration should have been doing things about. But certainly there's not a snowball's chance in hell that the Trumpistas are going to do anything about it. So there we go. There's me on my little soapbox for a little bit while. Certainly, we're also taking a larger look at what is or isn't going on in Europe. Orban is going to have an election coming up in Hungary. Will he still be able to hold on in power, or will their various oppositions finally be able to maneuver around all the problems that they've been having? Just how long can Putin sustain that terribly debilitating war where they've been running out of so many things that is effectively down to the point of just lobbing drones constantly, which are relatively cheap and easy to manufacture. But their tanks have been decimated. Their navy in the Black Sea has been gutted by the Ukrainians. It's a complex mix of things. And Putin may have the same sort of personality flaws that Trump has, of just doubling down, holding the line, don't give in, don't abandon things under the hope that tomorrow is another day. Well, we'll see. But a debilitating war brought down the czars back in 1917. So we'll see what the heck goes on in there. And then all the other issues that we've been having with the Chinese and the Pakistans and the Afghans that may be at loggerheads. Maybe they can bring in a bringer of peace Donald Trump to foster another imaginary peace treaty, and maybe FIFA can dust off another peace prize for him. What other groups can be doing that? Live circuit, isn't it? The LIV circuit, the golfing thing that the Saudis have put up to launder their reputation. Maybe they can give him a peace prize. We'll see what happens on this. Yes, company needs to reduce costs usually start with laying off employees. Yeah, to some extent. Well, the big experiment with AI that we're going to be seeing over the next few years is, to what extent is AI aimed primarily at laying off workers, replacing human workers with AI? And if you do that too much, who's buying your product? We have this terrible K-shaped economy where a huge proportion, as in like 40% or more in some sectors, is just being done by people at the top who have, the top 5 or 10% who have most of the money. And they're doing pretty good. But even they are starting to pull back on things. Now, the people at the bottom, the vast majority of them, a pullback there will affect other sectors. I mean, a Walmart and Costco and places that depend on regular consumers very heavily are ones that deal with that. Anyway, we will be seeing what happens again, and if Trump manages to squeak through his entire term without serious economic repercussions of these idiot policies, that would be a testament to how fantastically resilient the economy is. But I think that there's far too many warning signs out there that we're in 1929, and we'll find out whether or not over the next few years, and whether or not the shit hits the fan before the election. That's another dynamic variable, let alone all the attempts that the Trumpistas will do to try to restrict. The Supreme Court, in one of the dumber rulings I've ever seen in my life, says that you can't sue the post office if they deliberately decide to dilly-dally on delivering your votes. What kind of craziness is that? This is preposterous. Fortunately, Washington State, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because we have a mail-in system, and I have never used the post office, although it's got a postal thingy, because I have a drop box right up at the park. And so I never had to use the post office. And given that ruling from the Supreme Court, hell will freeze over before I would be using the post office. And I would recommend that anybody that lives in a state where that potentially could be a problem, prepare accordingly to make sure that the screw-ups and manipulations and dilly-dallying of the Trumpistas cannot prevent you from voting effectively. So there we go. Let me put up a thank you note from our patrons who continue to patron me over the years, which I am much appreciative of. And I bear in mind that if economic times get really icky, look to your own finances to make sure that that's the case. You are not being infringed upon financially. So our colleagues and researchers and assistants and friends and legacy people who over the years have helped out and continue to help out, which includes dear Ian Chan and Apologia and so many others down the road. And Slava, who I hope is well off in the Ukraine war zone land. There's been lots and lots of people who have had their own personal lives dealing with things. Anyway, everybody super duper stay safe and keep your powder dry, etc., etc. So let us put up a cute little advert for our volume 1 that dear Peter had constructed so beautifully before, and presumably we will have a counterpart when we get around to as I navigate around through my clinky clunkies here to get my windows oriented properly. Boop. And fire away, Peter. And of course, you sign up directly to the state election op, but that option isn't available. Yeah, the our Washington state system is really great here. There are lots and lots of drop boxes. As I said, the one that's right up at the library, it's just a stone's throw away. Even if there's terrible weather and the like, I can still walk up through it. It's an arterial, so the streets are always plowed, etc., etc. Easy peasy. And I'm not sure how the Utah system runs. They're also, I think, an entirely mail-in system. So when I hear about all of these fumings and Trump screams bloody murder of mail-in is a thing of fraud, no. And so it's been years and years and years since we've had physical ballot places to go to, and haven't missed it at all. It's very easy to handle. There's a website you can go to find out when your vote has been tallied, and it's all above board and efficient. And everybody should look at the way Washington State handles it and emulate that. And if anybody doesn't like it, well, poop on them. So anyway, we've got a little half-hour show flitting along in there. We're starting to see the end of the tunnel on this particular chapter. The next few episodes will be continuing to plow through the little skitter-scatter of technical literature that they're bumping into, heavily repeating source citations of Alan Fiducia. He's functionally their oracle on dismissing feathers, and it's a sad one to deal with. Fiducia is the Fred Hoyle of bird evolution, somebody that's not unskilled within his technical discipline, just ornithologist, but not per se a paleontologist, and his just adamant insistence that anything with feathers on it is a flightless bird or a bird, and that dinosaurs in principle can't be that. And if it turns out to have feathers, he moves it over to the bird category, independent of its internal anatomy. He's never been able to make a cladistic argument that could support a non-theropod ancestry for birds. And the decades of him kind of hoping that there was some Triassic thecodont that would pull the fat out of the fire as a ancestor route for a non-dinosaurian bird, that's never materialized. And I'm not holding my breath that that's ever going to materialize. So anyway, everybody be sure to stay safe. If the weather is icky, or if there are ice rampagers or any of the other vicissitudes of life that can make life annoying, keep the powder dry, hunker down. Bear in mind that there could be some bumpy economic times ahead and bumpy political times ahead, because Trump is a deranged old man who has surrounded himself with sycophant yes people who will do whatever he commands, regardless of how legal or illegal it is, and just brazen it on in. And they have all too frequently enablers, not 100% enablers, but certainly all too often enablers, all the way up to the Supreme Court. And which reminds us, you got to pay attention who's in the Senate. And people should have been paying attention to that, because they're the reasons why we're in the mess that we are. Imagine if there had been the Obama and Biden appointees put through there, rather than being stonewalled by the Republicans. So anyway, everybody stay safe, and we'll see you all next week, kids. Endings the stream now. If I can find my